is my favorite anime. There are many reasons for this, but the biggest is easily the many ideological conflicts present, which I intend to discuss in this video. There are many characters in Fate Zero, and almost all of them have an ideology that they wish to defend by taking part in the Holy Grail War. In fact, the Grail itself is used simply as a MacGuffin to help explore these ideologies. The most well known is probably the dispute between Saber and Ryder. I could probably do an analysis of that entire roundtable scene itself, because there's so much more to talk about than just these two, but for the time being, let's just stick with them. Saber's true identity is King Arthur, the legendary king of Great Britain. Her actions are very emotionally driven, and she desires to acquire the Holy Grail so that she can redo her tenure as king and quell the regrets she obtained during her life. Ryder criticizes her for this. His true identity is Alexander the Great, the legendary king of Greece, who despises the way she wants a do-over, believing that a proper king should never regret his actions no matter how wrong they turned out to be. Their epic debate lasts for several minutes. What starts as a simple conversation between kings while drinking Gilgamesh's wine quickly evolves into a heated argument about how a good king should act, which Gil himself opts to remain away from, just chuckling from the sidelines. The spat begins with the audience siding with Saber, seeing the value in an honorable, self-sacrificing king who serves as a pillar of support for his people. However, by the end, after Ryder uses his noble phantasm to defeat Assassin, most viewers began to agree with him, seeing the value in a strong king that can inspire strength into his followers. Now, I say most because I personally didn't. I mean, Saber is one of my all-time favorite anime characters, so you can probably imagine what my initial reaction to that scene was. This conversation was most noteworthy for kickstarting Saber's character arc, which goes on through the rest of the series and throughout Fate's Stay Night. During this spat, Gilgamesh just sat and listened, grinning occasionally at Ryder's statements. He didn't weigh in on this until much later in the show during their final fight with each other. Although Gil felt Saber was foolish for wishing to rewrite history, regretting her actions, he felt both her and Ryder were foolish for risking everything for their dreams, because when you die, your dream dies with you. He had very self-centered and nihilistic views on the world, not caring about anything or anyone but himself, which allowed him to be affected the least when it all crumbles. The exception, of course, is when he himself falls, which unfortunately doesn't happen in Fate Zero. This ideological conflict is the most fascinating in the show because we're dealing with two former kings, King Arthur and Alexander the Great, who, while similar in many ways, had entirely different lives, upbringings, reasons for becoming king, methods for how to rule their respective kingdoms, and directly opposing beliefs, which put them at odds on multiple occasions. Ryder wanted Saber to abandon her kingship and join his army in his noble phantasm, El-Melloi, while Saber sees Ryder as a cruel tyrant who cared little for his people, especially in comparison to her. Another captivating ideological conflict in this anime is the one between Saber and her master, Kiritsugu Emiya. Kiritsugu is the resident anti-hero and bona fide badass of Fate Zero. After a tragic childhood which caused him to murder his despicable father, he obtained a nihilistic view on the world, becoming the Mage Killer. His methods included using guns and the tiny bit of magic he possessed to stealth kill his enemies, using Saber as a mere decoy to achieve this. His initial goal is to use the Holy Grail to wish for a peaceful world. However, after learning of the Grail's true nature, his plan shifts to forcing Saber to destroy it. The way these two characters' beliefs conflict with each other should be apparent. In spite of her past, Saber had a mostly optimistic view on the world, disgusted with the way Kiritsugu just murders people, as well as his cowardly tactics. Kiritsugu, on the other hand, believes that the needs of the many outweighs the needs of the few, and that the ends justifies the means, and insults the concept of knight's honor and chivalry right to her face. One of my favorite scenes in the show is when Saber very calmly literally just psychoanalyzes Kiritsugu in less than a minute and gets every single word of it correct. She said that someone like him must have at one point in his life dreamed of becoming a true hero, and he responded with his desire to make the blood he sheds in Fuyuki City be the last blood humanity ever has to shed. This conversation spoke volumes, portraying Kiritsugu's cynicism and loss of hope, and Saber's desire to keep believing in spite of the entire world being against her. One of my favorite characters in the series is Lancer, one of the few who I find to be genuinely likable in every aspect. An honorable knight, he's probably one of the only who got along with Saber, the two wishing to engage in an honorable battle to the death over the Holy Grail. This mutual respect ends, however, when he's killed dishonorably by Kiritsugu. With his dying breath, he cursed everyone who would make mockery of a knight's honor. I can't be certain, but I believe Saber was also unfairly drawn into this as well, due to being Kiritsugu's servant. Guilt by association, basically. Moving on, I also wish to peer into the mind of Kariya Mato. Undoubtedly one of the most tragic characters in the show, he came from the Mato family, one of the three great mage families, but abandoned them due to the evil and sadistic nature of his grandfather, Zoken Mato. Because of this, Tokiomi Tosaka, head of the Tosaka family, has to give Zoken one of his daughters, Sakura Tosaka, to be groomed to be the next heir to the Mato family, which was originally supposed to be Kariya's position. When Kariya returns home to visit Sakura and her sister Rin, he's outraged to learn that Tokiomi agreed to this exchange. Their ideological conflict revolves around the lengths one should go to achieve the goals of the three families, which is to reach Akasha via the Holy Grail War. Tokiomi handed over Sakura so that the Matos would have an heir to participate in the next war in case they failed this time, but the Mato didn't have a master due to Kariya leaving. Kariya, however, objected to this, believing that Tokiomi should refuse, putting the safety of his daughter first no matter what. The bulk of their clash took place over the course of one scene, long after Kariya became the Mato master in the war. Kariya attempted to explain what Zoken was putting Sakura through, but Tokiomi disregarded his spat, instead opting to fight him, which resulted in Kariya being almost killed. Although this is a combat of ideologies, I think it's pretty clear who you're supposed to side with here. Kariya. Although we get a little bit more emotional depth for Tokiomi in episode 17, it's clear that he's supposed to be painted as the loser in the ideological battle, even though he wins the literal battle. That's a good segue into my only real complaint with the ideologies, which is that it's clear that Genrobuchi was trying to push a specific ideology. If you ask me, the absolute best way to depict ideological conflicts is to make it clear that there's a gray area and no black and white way of thinking. When writers spend several minutes berating Saber's ideology, but she isn't able to come up with any counterpoints, even though I could easily come up with about a dozen of them, you know something's wrong. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't side with Saber and defend her, as I do constantly, but it'd make it easier if she was able to successfully defend herself, which is something that the writing doesn't allow for. Aside from the ideological conflicts present out in the open, something I find just as fascinating are the ones that were indirectly implied. Am I the only one who really wanted to see Ryder and Kiritsugu confront each other and battle in the show? If you pay attention, then you know that the two would have never gotten along. Ryder was a king who lusted over war, combat, and conquest. Kiritsugu, on the other hand, wanted to end all bloodshed. It was his whole reason for entering the war to begin with. This might have been enough to convince both Kiritsugu and Saber to work in tandem, if only briefly, to defeat Ryder. I think that pretty much sums up my discussion of all of the major ideological conflicts in Fate Zero. It's by far the biggest draw of the series, and a key point of interest is that it's almost entirely because of Genrobuchi's writing. Aside from a few select sections, Fate Stay Night really doesn't focus on the ideologies of its characters as much, but one of the best parts about Genrobuchi as a writer is how much he focuses on differing ideologies, which is why he's my favorite writer. If you enjoyed my writing, then please be sure to subscribe to my channel for more videos, plus follow me on Twitter if you feel so inclined. If you prefer a link to the text version of this post, it'll be in the description. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.